Kwanza mtungi, wacha gas. Ile tunapunguza kati ya shilingi 300 na 500 ni mtungi yenyewe. Ndio sasa uongeze gas ndani yake.
That was President William Ruto in a joint media roundtable on Sunday this week. Jamila, do we begin with you? I mean, there's obviously been a lot of talk about the cost of gas, from the campaign trail and even after the swearing in now. But then we got some clarification on Sunday.
Yeah, that was a clarification, and I think we should listen to that clarification. It's bite 3. Yes, and then we can continue.
Kwa sasa hakuna njia ya kuondoa ushuru mpaka budget ipite.
Kwa hivyo huwezi kuhakikisha kwamba ikifika tarehe 1 Juni. Tarehe
1 Juni haiwezekani.
Yeah, you see, Rais said tarehe 1 Juni haiwezekani. And this was earlier in the year. The president had promised. I remember he was at a meeting at the launch of Taifa Gas.
Yeah, number 5.
Yes, a plant at the country's coastal region. I think we can start there where he talks about bei ya gas itapungua. That's bite 5.
Hakikisha ya kwamba bei ya gas itapungua kwa sababu tutaondoa pia ile kodi yote ambayo imewekwa kwa mambo ya gas, so that we can make sure that every household in the Republic of Kenya have access to gas for cooking, and we can eliminate the use of wood fuel.
And here the president was talking about his plans to make it easier and cheaper to get the cooking gas, and talked about cleaner energy for the majority of the population that relies mainly on kerosene, charcoal and firewood. At that same event, the launch of Taifa Gas plant, it was at the coast. That was when we had the first hint of the timelines during which the plans would materialize. I think we can listen to the president talking about within 3 years. That is bite 6.
Ndani ya miaka mitatu ijayo, serikali itafanya kazi na wale wote wahusika tuhakikishe kwamba ndani ya miaka mitatu ijayo kila nyumba katika taifa letu la Kenya itakuwa na mtungi wa gas.
And I think it was a month later when we were marking the International Women's Day. Now that's when the plans seem to get a bit more concrete, a bit more specific, where the president talked about the pricing and the timelines. Now we're trying to see how it was going to go. And I think we can listen to the president talking about ile bei tutanunua. That should be bite number 7, on International Women's Day.
Zia mwezi wa 6, hiyo mtungi itatoka shilingi 2,800 mpaka shilingi 500 ama 300.
That's the point where people are expecting come 1st of June, we're going to get that cheap gas. And then now, when the president was in the interview with the journalists on Sunday, I think that's when he said, well, this may not happen. You heard what he said. He talked about how ni mtungi ambao bei yake itashuka, lakini sio gas yenyewe. And I think he explained why the non-fulfillment of the cheaper gas promise was because of the country's laws. I think we can listen to the president talk about the budget. This is bite number 8.
Mimi nataka niwaambie hii mafuta inaongezwa usiku na mchana.
Kama tungepitisha hii jambo kwa supplementary budget, June ingewezekana. Lakini tulijaribu kuisukuma kwa supplementary budget, ikawa haiwezekani kwa sababu ilikuwa inatubidi tubadilishe sheria fulani.
And that was the president on Sunday. But he said that price cuts for cooking gas will take effect once the 2023-2024 budget is passed. But if you look at that promise and the fact that people had hoped they'll be able to buy cooking gas and be able to use it starting 1st of June, it's disappointing to the extent that now the price of the kerosene that you're talking about, the firewood that you're talking about, that you're trying to replace with the gas, has gone up 15 shillings higher for kerosene that a lot of Kenyans use for cooking. We had done a story about mothers in Kisii, others in the Ruto satellite, talking about how they use maybe 50 shillings for mafuta hiyo ya kerosene that would be enough kupika lunch. But then they're saying kama imepanda na shilingi 15 zaidi kwa lita, how much am I supposed to spend to be able to cook that lunch for my children? There was a gentleman there who owns mahali ambapo anauza mafuta ya taa, akasema leo sina stock. Kwa sababu I'll not be able to afford to buy that stock, which is 15 shillings higher.
And you won't have buyers.
And you won't have buyers for it, yeah.
Because of the high cost.
Because of the high cost. So it's difficult for a lot of people.
Yeah. Linus, there's been quite a bit of evolution on the issue of cooking gas, cheaper cooking gas, and now it's the cylinder, which, to be honest, is perhaps a great thing, but it's also a one-off. You know, you buy a cylinder once. It's the gas itself that, which actually was the promise, you know, in the beginning.
Let's do a very simple survey, starting from this table here. Have you ever gone to a gas station to order for an empty gas cylinder?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Because gas cylinders are about the content of it. And I think the president this week has been a subject of very interesting memes and things like that. I saw one gas cylinder, you know, supposedly has a space for firewood. Another one has a space for charcoal. I think there's a bit of retreating to be done by the government to just, first of all, get clarity on how this very good intention is supposed to play out and when it can be actualized. Because we are watching the president, even in the interview, and pastoralists would understand the analogy of a long rope. And a long rope detests movement because it can tie your legs and tie your feet. And I saw the president actually struggle with this story of cooking gas. It's probably time he steps back, says nothing about it for a while until his government, especially his treasury, figures out exactly how this benefit is going to be rolled out. Otherwise, it's coming across as an unbelievable narrative, a story that you cannot buy. And it doesn't paint the president well, especially when timelines are starting to lapse. Because then you have a June 1st date to keep explaining. And there was an explanation he gave there, and I think we listened to it.
Yeah, we did, yes.
I don't know whether
we did. Where he talked about the plans to push it in the supplementary budget.
Supplementary.
Yeah, we've heard that, yes.
Yes. And these were things that his team ought to have figured out in February when he was making the promise. And look, some of these promises, the president ought to be very careful about making because he's dealing with real human beings with actual expectations. Do you remember the cheering those women made in KICC when he made that announcement?
Yeah, on Women's Day.
On Women's Day. How will those women feel on the 2nd of June? Because they were told by 1st of June, you will have this cylinder costing you 2,800, going down to 300 to 500. He should be careful about making these promises unless they have completely figured out, in fact, the timelines of rollout. Because in the end, they'll be held against the president and he'll be accused of uttering inaccuracies.
Yeah, Sam, before we come to you, because I just want to pick up on that thread of promises made. In fact, on the issue of fuel, I want us to listen to the president, then presidential candidate, out on the campaign trail on the taxes on fuel in the country.
Nataka niwaambie hii mafuta inaongezwa usiku na mchana. Mimi nataka niwaeleze ya kwamba these people don't understand the damage they are doing to the people and the economy of Kenya. Kwa hii taxes wanaongeza usiku na mchana. Na mimi nataka niwaulize watu wa hapa Manga, tafadhali, mkiona tumesimama hapa mbele yenu, tunawaambia ya kwamba tutengeneze hiyo serikali inakuja ambayo inaelewa lugha ya.
And still during the campaign trail, actually during presidential debates on July the 26th, this is what he said to me when I asked him the question on the price of fuel and the taxes therein.
In the year 2015, I believe, when this was passed, we're pushing for 8% to be added on VAT. Today, you are saying you want to abolish VAT on petroleum products. Why should Kenyans believe you today?
Why wouldn't they? I mean, we live in a dynamic country, and it's only fools who don't change their mind. If you are in a situation where the price of fuel has gone to 160, I mean, it's time to think. I mean, when this VAT was imposed, then the price of fuel was under 100. I think any reasonable government, looking at the situation where we are, looking at the cost of living, and how many Kenyans are every day sinking below the poverty line, I think it takes a courageous government to sit down with our development partners, and they are fairly reasonable people, and have a discussion.
That's right. So on the issue of VAT, now in the proposals of the Finance Bill 2023, there is the proposal to actually double VAT on fuel from 8% to 16%. Again, I guess that was just to sort of reiterate the very categorical promises that were made, and you know, reality is a little different on the ground, as they say, Sam?
I think the president is covered because he said that it's only fools that don't change their mind.
So maybe he has changed his mind.
He's changed his mind, probably. Yeah. But even if that saves him, it's interesting. Maybe the reality on the ground has hit him, that now you're in office and things are different, because he was giving an example that the first time that the VAT was being introduced, a litre of petrol was roughly 100 shillings. Yeah. This time round, during the time of the debate, it was 160. So you're saying that it is time to scrap it.
Today it's 182.
It is time to have conversations with the IMF.
Yeah.
Now, today, the litre of petrol, like you're saying, is 182 shillings. There is a finance bill, and the reasoning that he gave is that there's a lot of manipulation that people are doing because of the difference in the rate. Some VAT is charged at 8% for fuel, it's 16% for others. He gave a lot of explanation and even said that IMF does not run the government of Kenya. He does, because he's the head of state. So there's still some bit of explaining that you'd need to do, but also I think it's important also for the government to realize that there was the time of campaigning, the time of reality is now, so it is also good to be forthright with Kenyans. If it is not possible to lower the cost of, say, cooking gas, the cost of Mtungia gas, if it is not possible, say as much, so that people know how to plan their resources. Earlier this week, I was having a conversation with one of the members of parliament, and he was explaining and saying, defending the introduction of the housing levy, which is about 3%. And so we're doing quick calculations and saying that, for instance, if the maximum is to stay at 5,000 shillings, so that would be 2,500 shillings for the employer, 2,500 shillings for the employee. If you are to give 2,500 shillings to the housing fund as an employee, so meaning it is not part of your disposable income, but then you're saying there's a benefit that there's an 8% reduction in VAT. I mean, the VAT on cooking gas, LPG, is being removed. For you to buy Mtungia gas, let's say it's 13 kgs, you spend between 2,500 shillings and 3,300 or thereabout. So if you're taking the 2,500 shillings for housing fund, but removing the VAT of 8%, which is very little, so what are you saying? Because now you're taking that disposable income that is supposed to be buying that gas. Yeah. So it is important that government comes out clearly and says that we're in a serious economic situation. We need to finance our programs. It is not possible to keep the promises that we made. Remember, there's already a pending promise on lowering the cost of unga. The start of this month or towards the end of last month, there is some unga that was retailing at 157 shillings. I don't know how that is
going, bearing in mind that some of the brands that I've seen are still selling close to 200 shillings, if not more. If you look at sugar, it's now at more than 430 shillings for 2 kg of sugar. If you look at rice, don't even start. So really, it is not likely that you can...
Curiously, the sugar prices have gone up in the last 9 days.
Right.
Yeah.
To close to 50%.
Yeah.
9 days, what is going on?
But then you now ask yourself, that coincides with the release of the contaminated sugar into the market.
Yeah, because the release must happen anytime between 20th of April and 4th of May.
And that's when we've seen a spike in the cost. So
something is not adding up. So there's a lot of explaining to do. Okay.
And even if you look at the prices of petrol, and if Parliament does pass the Finance Bill 2023 and the proposed 16% VAT on fuel, pump prices will reach almost 200 shillings per litre. That is if Parliament approves it. Because a litre of super will rise by 13 shillings and 51 cents to reach 196 shillings after the additional taxes. Diesel will rise by about 12 shillings to get to about 180 shillings, Yvonne. And there are some places here in Kenya, for instance, Mandera, it's almost already 200 shillings per litre of petrol right now after EPRA announced the new prices. And I think in total it is projected that the VAT collections will double to an estimated about 128 billion annually, or about 10.7 billion a month. That's what I think they are going for. Because even if you look now at the collections, at the tax collections by the Treasury, as of now, they're actually 1.3 trillion short to meet the spending budgets for the financial year running to June 30th. So these guys have between now and June to raise about 1.286 trillion to close the gap within the month. And that's absolutely ridiculous. Because if you look at collections the past 10 months, Yvonne, they've really been short of what has been expected. So kuna hiyo ambayo bado inawasumbua, kuna pesa ambazo zinahitajika ambazo haziko. But then look at this on the side that e-finance bill ikipita. These are some of the things that's going to affect you. Already tumeona how much the cost of living is going up with the way the situation is now. And then come June, after budget itasomwa, itapitishwa, what does that do to consumers who are currently paying so much?
I just want to say something quickly, because I think we can't leave this without mentioning, the housing fund. I know he says, IMF does not call the shots, but exactly what is happening now with VAT, and that has come up in the IMF reviews. And this is as a result of the 38-month facility that they have extended to Kenya. This is through the COVID-19 period. And one of the issues that they raise is, fiscal consolidation and increased revenue mobilization. And they have raised certain flags around, one, the subsidies on fuel, two, the VAT. Basically, what they're saying is, you have all this money that you need to raise, as you have clearly pointed out, Jamila, you need to raise funds locally from taxation and other matters. IMF has also talked about the non-performance of state-owned enterprises, particularly singling out public universities. And now we're seeing, the sort of change with, the revenue funding models for universities. We're taking a look at some of the changes that are being made there. Just something interesting to talk about. And then there was also the issue of the housing fund. I mean, I thought maybe we could just mention that really quickly, because there was a bit of, an exchange on this. Is it a tax? Is it a levy? But he has been quite spirited on this, Sam, particularly even today with the visiting Singaporean Prime Minister. So again, another issue that is really up for debate, Sam.
Yes, and I'm just looking forward to seeing, excuse me, the conversation on the floor of the House, because a lot has been said, and you saw the president defending it, saying that it's a patriotic duty for those that are working.
Yeah.
And he used this example saying that there's some 700,000 Kenyans that work in the civil service, or the public service, if you like. And he was saying that it's the duty of those working in that sector to be in a position to give back to the vulnerable, especially those that are paying tax to afford them, that are in office. So, but then again, obviously, when you look at the Finance Act of 2023, I don't know why I keep saying 2013, of 2023, it talks about, it doesn't specify whether it's a person working in the public service or the private sector. So we'd assume that it's because this is applying in Kenya, it is every other person that is also working in the private sector. And also that's why we've also seen the Federation of Kenyan Employers saying that we have seen the impact that NSSF has had on businesses, of course, after raising it to 6%, which is also matched by the employer. They've also seen the proposal to raise NHF contributions to 2.75% of a salary. I mean, without a limit. It's not capped. It's not like what you have now. So they're just imagining what this would mean to businesses at a time that they've been suffering. Because if the government is struggling with revenues, you can also imagine what's happening to businesses. And therefore, there appears to be a bit of misunderstanding, or maybe it's not sufficient consultations with stakeholders to really reflect on, yes, there's a target, there's a goal that the government wants to achieve. And the president is saying even today that we have to sacrifice. If we have to get to the route of Singapore, there are certain sacrifices that have to be taken. And that is a good call to the nation. But then again, what are the underlying, the contextual realities that exist at the moment, which is what has to be considered. Like I said, I'm looking forward to hearing from the members of parliament how they're going to argue. Early in the week, I had a member of parliament from Nyeri Town, Duncan Mathenge, and he was saying that for him, it should be opened up to make it voluntary, so that if you want to contribute in that plan, that you want to keep your money for 7 years, so that it can be given back to you and taxed as you receive it.
That's what I was going to
let it be your choice.
Indeed. Linus, final word, and then we can...
The housing levy, we saw the president today standing side by side with the Prime Minister of Singapore, and once again defending the levy and his government's proposal to introduce it in this coming financial year. Now, there is a whole debate around this, and I don't know whether we've played or we don't have that, FKE. And one thing that really emerges is a yawning opportunity for dialogue about what the government intends to execute and how it intends to achieve this dream of affordable housing. Because let's face it, government comes to the table with a very poor record in public housing. A record that first of all starts with mismanaging what it already found. You see, when you look at the history of Nairobi, some of the best residential estates were owned by government. And that is at two levels. There was the national government, and there was the County Council of Nairobi, City Council of Nairobi. The City Council of Nairobi in 1972, for example, constructed Madaraka Estate using a loan from the National Housing Corporation, NHC. And then President Jomo Kenyatta opened the housing estate. And before that, of course, there were estates like Otiende Estate in Langata. All these were put through the effort of government. When you look at subsequent management of those facilities and those estates already boxed government out as a trusted means towards whether affordable or even just available housing. Housing in this country, and we need to give credit to the hard-working, ordinary Kenyan. Look at how many landlords we have out there. People who actually break their backs, go to banks, take loans, and construct blocks of apartments. Now, this housing levy conversation is the sort of conversation starter nations have, where government is the main provider of answers to everything. In the Kenyan situation, we must ask the genuine question and legitimate question: is government really? Uhuru Kenyatta, spoke of a Kenyan car again. We need to be sober about some of these things, because there are things which, as part of our global environment, you don't need to replicate. You don't need to make again, because there is more than you need already. And that's why our production, should be focusing on what we can export. And what we export is what other people don't have. So we make our phones so that we export to and maybe compete with Samsung in Korea. On housing levy, we need a conversation. We need to talk to each other. I feel the private sector has not been spoken to well. And I feel that we are not engaging our biggest resource that we have as a country, which is our people.
Okay.
By the way, outside government and inside government, we have a lot of very knowledgeable Kenyans who have been providing solutions throughout time. Now, we can't really have political pronouncements that have not been tested. And then we try and build our future around it. So on this housing levy, and Sam, you were doing a little math earlier of how long it actually takes if we are using 5,000 as a base. And look, the housing levy to me sounds exactly like it's starting to sound similar with the gas cylinders, where you are not sure how does it work. Where is the 300? The 300 is supposed to be on the empty. So the 3%, will it give you your house, and or will it be an investment? And there's a word I heard today, invocation of patriotism and sacrifice. Meaning you can donate and build it and say, that's my sacrifice.
Yeah, for the
as a patriotic, I'm doing this for the nation.
Yeah.
Take my house.
Yeah.
It is actually, okay, not in those direct terms, but it's actually in the finance bill saying that if you don't qualify, like yourself, you don't qualify for affordable housing. So at the end of 7 years, you may decide to donate it to your son, your daughter, or someone else who qualifies for affordable housing. But I asked a question. I asked one of the legislators a question. What happens after 7 years? So now, because I can take away my money and be taxed again, because I'll have already paid tax before it's deducted, and they have no idea. So what it tells is that it's still so much work in progress. And it is okay that the government can admit and say, yes, we have that proposal, it's work in progress, so much more will be done. Because I had one of the members of parliament saying that the rest will come in regulations, but there are certain things that are too important to be left for subsidiary legislation. In this case, regulations by ministries. This is something that requires proper public participation, requires proper debate in the House, and you can only hope that this will be done in the coming days.
Yeah.
So, here's one thing I just want to quickly add as we wrap up, because there is obviously the need to rely on government for certain answers. But I feel housing levy runs way ahead of its time.